In the quiet streets of Hampton, Virginia, where the hum of daily life seems to flow like any other small town, the events of June 2021 would soon tear apart the fabric of a family, a community, and the life of a promising young woman. Raegan Sharnae Chisley, just 20 years old, had her entire future ahead of her. Dreams of becoming a doctor, helping others, and making a difference in the world. But all that changed in a single, devastating moment. It was supposed to be a normal summer. Raegan had returned to Hampton, her hometown, from North Carolina Central University to catch up with old friends and spend time with her family. Like many young people her age, she was eager to enjoy the break. Little did she know, her trip home would end in tragedy, and the street where she once walked would soon bear the weight of a loss so heavy, it would never be forgotten. It wasn't a car accident. It wasn't a natural disaster. No, this was a violent act. One that would rock the very core of her community. Raegan's life was taken in an instant, by someone she had known, someone tied to her best friend, someone who should never have had the chance to make that deadly decision. The story you're about to hear is not just one of violence, but of a series of choices, each moment leading to a catastrophic end. It's a story about a teenager with anger in his heart, a gun in his hand, and a future ruined in an act of desperation. It's about a young woman whose life was cut short, whose dreams and potential were stolen. And it's about the consequences of choices made in the heat of an argument. Choices that no one could ever take back. Stay with us as we unravel the events that led to that fateful night. The tension that built, the emotions that surged, and the moment when everything changed. Because when a gun is fired, it doesn't just take a life. It takes away the possibilities, the future, and the potential of so many. This is Raegan Chisley's story. A story of loss, regret, and a family left picking up the pieces. And if you're watching, ask yourself, can something so tragic truly be avoided? Could this story have had a different ending? Before we go deeper into the heart of this tragedy, make sure you subscribe, because this is a story that needs to be heard, understood, and remembered. And for those who won't hit subscribe, leave us a comment and tell us why. What is holding you back from taking that simple step? Raegan Sharnae Chisley's summer break from North Carolina Central University was meant to be a time for relaxation and reconnection with family. At just 20 years old, she was more than just a student. Raegan had always been the kind of person who saw the world through a lens of compassion. Whether it was her love for the elderly, her tender care for children, or her deep desire to become a doctor to help those in need, her life was full of promise. But that summer, as Raegan returned to her hometown of Hampton, Virginia, the very streets she walked would soon become a backdrop to a chilling and tragic chapter of her life. Raegan was excited to be home, spending time with her friends and family, the people who knew her best. She was more than just a student to them. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. It was a familiar rhythm, the laughter, the hugs, the comfort of home after months of hard work at school. Everything felt normal, safe even, but beneath the surface, things were starting to shift. One of the most important people in Raegan's life was her best friend, Khadijah Newsome. Khadijah and Raegan had been inseparable throughout high school, and their bond had only deepened over the years. Khadijah, who was Tyler's cousin, reached out to Raegan with a request that seemed harmless enough. She needed help to recover some money and marijuana she believed had been stolen by Zaquan Tyler, her cousin. Tyler, a 16-year-old living in Hampton, had been involved in a series of minor disputes and was known to have a quick temper. His relationship with Khadijah was strained due to accusations that he had stolen around $500 in cash and some marijuana from her. The money included tips from her restaurant job and even some graduation gifts. Raegan, ever the supportive friend, agreed to accompany Khadijah to Tyler's home, not realizing the danger they were about to face. When they arrived at the home on Berkeley Drive, Tyler was sitting inside, playing video games, seemingly unconcerned with the tension brewing between him and Khadija. But it didn't take long for things to escalate. Tyler denied stealing anything, laughing off Khadija's accusations, adding fuel to the fire. The argument intensified quickly, voices grew louder, and Raegan found herself in the middle of a dispute she had no personal stake in, yet one that would soon have life-altering consequences. Tyler's mother, Lisa Royal, entered the scene and sided with her son. She insisted that Tyler hadn't stolen anything, dismissing Khadija's claims and defending him vehemently. Raegan and Khadija, still determined to get to the bottom of things, pushed back. The tension mounted. Khadija, frustrated, exchanged heated words with Lisa, but nothing seemed to resolve the issue. At one point, Lisa, in an impulsive moment of anger, walked across the street to Raegan's car and punched her through the window. This was no longer just an argument over money. This was something deeper, something personal. The dispute between Khadija and Tyler had taken a dangerous turn. But what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. In a moment that would change everything, Zaquan Tyler, 16 years old, walked out of his mother's house, carrying a gun. The sight of him, gun in hand, was a sign that things were about to take an even darker turn. But no one, not Raegan, not Khadija, was prepared for what happened next. Tyler, in an act of sheer anger, raised the gun and shot Raegan. In a fraction of a second, Raegan's life was cut short, and everything she had worked for, everything she could have become, vanished. The world, once full of opportunity, was now dark and still. Raegan, collapsed on the street, was rushed to the hospital. But despite the best efforts of medical professionals, her injuries were too severe, and she was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Raegan's mother, Shania Jackson, would later describe her daughter as more than just a child. She was her best friend. The pain of losing Raegan wasn't just the loss of a young life. It was the loss of a bright future. A future that had been ripped away by a senseless act of violence. Raegan was taken from the world too soon, a victim of a fight that was never hers to fight. The aftermath was nothing short of a nightmare for the Chisley family. The emotional toll on Raegan's parents and siblings was immeasurable. Her father, Terry Chisley, couldn't understand how his daughter had become a victim of such brutality. He had dedicated so much of his life to helping others, and yet he couldn't protect his own child. The heartbreak of losing Raegan, the pain of knowing she was never going to fulfill her dreams of becoming a doctor, was unbearable. As the community mourned, the question lingered in the air. How had it all come to this? How had a simple dispute escalated into the tragic death of a young woman with so much potential? The answers wouldn't come easily, and the journey to justice for Raegan would prove to be long and filled with emotional turmoil. But the tragedy didn't end with Raegan's death. The legal battle was just beginning, and as the investigation into Zaquan Tyler's actions unraveled, the community was forced to face the painful truth of how easily a life can be destroyed in an instant. What came next in the courtroom would shock the entire city of Hampton. The impact of Raegan Chisley's death sent shockwaves through the Hampton community. Her passing wasn't just the loss of a young woman with a promising future. It was a stark reminder of the volatility of emotions and how quickly life can change. For those who knew Raegan, especially her family, the grief was unbearable. But for others, it was the beginning of an unsettling realization. How could a dispute between two young people lead to the loss of someone so full of life? In the days following Raegan's death, her family and friends were forced to confront the unimaginable. Raegan's mother, Shania Jackson, struggled to make sense of it all. Her daughter was her rock, her confidant, and now, in an instant, she was gone. Shania would later say that Raegan was more than just a daughter to her. She was her best friend, the one person who made her smile even during the toughest times. Now, her world was turned upside down. Raegan's father, Terry Chisley, was equally devastated. As he reflected on his daughter's life, the grief overwhelmed him. He thought back to all the ways he had tried to help others, especially the kids in his neighborhood, yet he couldn't protect his own child. He lamented that while he had spent so much time trying to change the lives of others, he couldn't save Raegan from the fate that awaited her. His voice cracked as he recalled the simple but meaningful moments he shared with her. Her laughter, the sound of her walking up the stairs, the jingling of her bracelets. Those small, seemingly insignificant things were now irreplaceable, lost forever. Her siblings, a 15-year-old brother and an 11-year-old brother, were struggling to cope with the loss in their own ways. One of them started sleeping with the lights on and refused to go outside. The sadness was etched in their faces as they tried to comprehend the world without their older sister. The pain wasn't just felt by her immediate family. It rippled through every person who knew her. Raegan's best friend, Khadija Newsom, was also torn apart. She was the one who had invited Raegan to Tyler's home that day, hoping to get back what she believed had been stolen. Khadija, struggling with guilt, couldn't fathom how their simple attempt to retrieve money and marijuana had turned into something much darker. She had never anticipated that it would lead to Raegan losing her life. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders, but the events that unfolded were out of her control. Khadija, despite being caught in the crossfire, would live with the knowledge that her actions indirectly contributed to a tragedy that no one could undo. The shockwaves of Raegan's death also reverberated through her community and beyond. As her family tried to process their grief, they were faced with a wave of disbelief from those who had known Raegan as a warm-hearted, vibrant, and promising young woman. A young woman who had once helped her friend, Zaquan Tyler, learn how to drive, who had called her grandparents every night without fail, who had spent her weekends helping others. Her life was not just a collection of academic achievements. It was a reflection of kindness, compassion, and a desire to give back to the world. The local community felt the sting of Raegan's death in a way that only such a sudden, senseless loss could provoke. In the aftermath, a new wave of questions arose. How could this happen? How could a teenager, still so young and impressionable, let a dispute spiral so out of control? How could a gun be the solution to something that could have been resolved with words, or at most, a fist fight? But what happened next would begin to unravel the tragedy in a way no one was prepared for. As authorities searched for Zaquan Tyler, the teenager who had fired the fatal shot, the tension in Hampton only grew. Was this a case of self-defense? Was it a moment of rage, fueled by a sense of loyalty to his mother? Or was it something darker, something deeper, that led to the irreversible loss of a young life? Days after the shooting, authorities located Zaquan in a Newport News motel, where he had been hiding for over 2 weeks. His arrest brought some relief to the grieving community, but it also marked the beginning of a long and painful legal journey. Zaquan Tyler, the 16-year-old boy who had pulled the trigger, was now facing charges of first-degree murder. But as the case developed, the situation became more complicated. Zaquan's defense lawyers argued that he had acted out of passion, defending his mother in what they claimed was an escalating situation. But the prosecution painted a different picture. They suggested that Tyler had time to think about his actions. It wasn't an impulsive outburst. It was a decision made with intent, a decision that ended in Raegan's death. The case would soon become a focal point in the larger conversation about gun violence, young people, and the ease with which firearms were accessible in the community. In the midst of the investigation, the Chisley family found themselves in an emotional limbo. They waited for justice, but they knew that no sentence would bring Raegan back. The legal proceedings would never fill the hole left by her absence. The trial that followed, and the eventual sentencing of Zaquan Tyler, was as much about finding justice as it was about finding peace. Something that would prove elusive for those who had lost so much. The weeks that followed were filled with a painful sense of uncertainty. Was the legal system truly equipped to handle the ramifications of the actions of a 16-year-old? Was a manslaughter conviction enough for Raegan's family to feel that justice had been served? And would Zaquan Tyler ever truly understand the magnitude of his actions? As the legal drama unfolded, the impact of Raegan's death on her family and the broader community remained unchanged. The questions lingered, but the answer was clear. This was a senseless tragedy that no one, not even the young shooter himself, could undo. As the legal battle continued, the questions grew. Could Zaquan Tyler's actions ever be fully justified? And how would the court decide the fate of a young man whose single decision took the life of someone with so much promise? The courtroom drama was about to take center stage, and the final chapter in this heartbreaking story was yet to be written. The arrest of Zaquan Tyler brought a temporary sense of closure to the Hampton community, but it was clear that the road to justice for Raegan Chisley would be long and painful. As the trial approached, the atmosphere surrounding the case became more charged. Questions of justice, accountability, and the true nature of Tyler's actions loomed over the proceedings. Would the 16-year-old be held fully responsible for taking the life of a promising young woman? Or would his age and impulsive actions be taken into consideration? The courtroom became the stage for a battle between two very different versions of the events that had unfolded on that fateful June day. Prosecutors painted a picture of a teenager who had acted recklessly, with fatal consequences. They argued that Zaquan had the time to reconsider his actions, that he could have walked away from the escalating confrontation. His decision to pick up a gun, they contended, was not a split-second reaction to an immediate threat. It was a decision made out of anger, defiance, and a misguided sense of loyalty to his mother. The prosecution emphasized the brutality of the situation. Raegan Chisley, an innocent bystander, had been shot in the chest, a bullet piercing her heart as she stood in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had no part in the argument between Khadija and Tyler, yet she was the one who paid the ultimate price. Her death was not just a tragic mistake. It was a senseless, preventable act of violence. As the trial unfolded, Raegan's family members were forced to relive the harrowing details of their daughter's final moments. Shania Jackson, Raegan's mother, had to recount the unbearable pain of losing her daughter. The one person she had turned to for comfort, the one person who had made her smile even in the darkest of times. In her testimony, she spoke of the gaping hole that Raegan's absence had left in her heart. Her words resonated throughout the courtroom, a mother's grief laid bare for everyone to see. The emotional toll on the Chisley family was palpable, and their pain seemed to echo in every corner of the courtroom. Terry Chisley, Raegan's father, spoke with heart-wrenching honesty about the loss of his daughter. He recalled the small, everyday moments that made Raegan so special. The sound of her walking through the house, the jingling of her bracelets as she moved. Those seemingly insignificant details were now precious memories, reminders of a life they had lost. The courtroom fell silent as he recalled his futile attempts to protect his own child, a father unable to shield his daughter from a senseless act of violence. His words, raw and anguished, captured the depth of the family's loss. The day of Zaquan Tyler's sentencing finally arrived, a day that had been months in the making. For the Chisley family, this moment was both a closing of a chapter and yet, in many ways, the beginning of a new, painful reality. They had already buried Raegan, their beloved daughter, sister, and friend, and now they would face the reality of whether justice would be served in the court of law. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with emotion. The Chisley family arrived, their hearts heavy with the weight of everything they had lost. As they sat in silence, waiting for the judge to speak, the pain of losing Raegan was visible in every face. Shania Jackson, Raegan's mother, sat in the front row, clutching a tissue in her hand, her face a mixture of sorrow and quiet strength. She had already lost her daughter. Now she was about to hear the final words from the court that would determine Zaquan Tyler's future. The sentencing hearing began with words from Hampton Circuit Judge Michael Gatton, who had been overseeing the case. Judge Gatton addressed the courtroom with a somber tone, acknowledging the immense tragedy that had taken place. He spoke of the importance of accountability and the need for young people to understand the gravity of their actions. As the days passed, the community of Hampton began to process the loss too. Raegan had been a beloved figure, not just within her family, but throughout her circle of friends and acquaintances. Those who knew her saw her as someone who always made time for others, someone who was genuinely kind and who had a heart for service. Her absence left a void that no one could fill. Friends who had grown up with her struggled to understand how something so senseless could happen to someone they had known for so long. They clung to the memories of happier times, but those memories only highlighted the unbearable fact that Raegan was no longer there. The community rallied around the Chisley family, offering condolences and support, but there was little that could truly ease the pain. For the Chisleys, the grief was all-consuming. Each day was a battle to stay afloat, to survive the emotional weight that pressed down on them like a storm cloud that refused to dissipate. Shania and Terry clung to each other, but the emotional toll was immense. They attended counseling, but even that couldn't fill the void left by their daughter's death. In the aftermath, the question arose: how do you move forward after such a tragic loss? For the Chisley family, it wasn't about forgetting or letting go. It was about learning to live with the grief, about finding a way to honor Raegan's memory while still trying to rebuild their lives. Zaquan Tyler, now serving his sentence, would spend the rest of his life grappling with the consequences of his actions. He would have time to reflect on the devastating impact of his decision, not just on his own future, but on the lives of those around him. In the years to come, the Chisley family would continue to advocate for justice, pushing for more stringent laws and for greater awareness of the dangers of gun violence, especially among young people. They would continue to speak out, not just for Raegan, but for every other victim of senseless violence who had been robbed of their future. As the years went on, the Chisley family found moments of peace in their mission. Their fight for change, for justice, and for Raegan's legacy became a part of who they were. The scholarship fund, the community programs, the legislative efforts, these were their ways of keeping Raegan alive, of ensuring that her spirit lived on in the lives of others. They had taken their darkest moment and used it to fuel something brighter, something that could change the lives of others for the better. Through the pain, the Chisley family had discovered the power of resilience. They had learned that while Raegan's death could never be undone, they had the ability to influence the world around them in ways that honored her memory. Their fight was not over, but they had found a sense of purpose in their grief, and in that, they had discovered healing. Raegan's story is one of heartbreak, but it's also one of strength, resilience, and the power to create change. The Chisley family's journey hasn't been easy, but they've turned their grief into a force for good. If Raegan's story has touched your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Don't wait for another story like this to pass you by. Be a part of the movement for change. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how you'll carry her legacy forward. If you believe that we can make a difference, subscribe and stay with us for more stories that matter. And for those who haven't subscribed yet, ask yourself why not. Will you let this moment pass without doing something? Hit subscribe to join the fight for justice, and to ensure that Raegan's story lives on in the hearts of others. Your action today could be the spark for change tomorrow.